everyone, welcome back to the Realennials. I'm Ruby.
I'm Pat.
And we are joined today by Nicholas Segura.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us.
Happy to have you. So we wanted to ask you, first and foremost, where are you from?
Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, USC 500. I think that's one of those things that I'm so trained to say that. People from Wyandotte County, they say that so all the time for some reason.
Yeah, the Wyandotte County are very proud people.
They are a very proud people.
I live there now. What school did you go to? High school?
I went to Wyandotte, but I graduated from Schlegel.
Okay, cool.
I grew up in Bryant Manor Apartments on 38th in Minnesota, where everyone knows where that's at.
I do not, but I'll go check it out one day.
Yeah, I went back there not too long ago. It was really cool just to go back to your childhood playgrounds and things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you lived here your whole life, or did you ever move away?
I have. That's funny too, like, because in the Hispanic marketing world, when I'm like dealing with clients, that's a funny question because people ask me that question a lot. They're like, "So how long have you been here?" And I'm like, 46 years.
The whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at a weird point in my life where I am not, like, I wasn't raised here, but now I feel like I've lived here long enough that I tell people I'm from here. So I'm from Kansas City now. Mm. And that's kind of a weird thing for me because I've always been from somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I'm still from Garden City. I still claim it.
Yeah. It's just, people know where Kansas City is. I mean, people around here, some people know where Garden City is, but not everybody.
Yeah, not everybody.
And then when you tell them you're from Western Kansas, it's like they have these images of what it's like out there. And it's like, no, that's not me.
Isn't there a new
farmers.
Documentary being shot or was shot out in Garden City?
Yes, they're actually debuting it in Lawrence in 2 weeks, January 19th.
Yeah.
It was a professor at KU. My cousin's actually taking his class, and he was telling me about it. I honestly don't know very much about it. Have you heard about this documentary?
There's been good documentaries on and off throughout the years.
Yeah,
I think
people
CNN
do
did like a
studies.
small mini doc on that, and a lot of people talk about the diversity there. It's just
I think
hugely
that's
diverse.
something that's really interesting because in the marketing world, we talk about cities like Garden City, Dodge, which are 50% plus Hispanic population, and like that's greater than what the population trends are supposed to be in the future. It's like these cities are the majority Hispanic population out there. So
Have you ever been out there to Garden City?
No, I haven't been to Garden, but I've been to Hayes, which is north of that.
It's pretty much all the same.
Yeah. Okay. I need to go. I'd like to go.
Yeah, it's funny when people talk about, like, I tell people I'm from Western Kansas, and they're like, oh, I've been to Salina or Hayes or whatever. Like, no, that's central Kansas, I think.
Now, isn't Hayes like on the border there?
No.
Right on the border of Colorado?
Nope.
Okay.
Hayes is only halfway across the state.
Oh, snap.
So almost right in the middle.
I guess I'm messing up my geography right now.
There's a few cities. I can't remember all the cities along those. Anyways.
Yeah, we're from the rural part of the state where people.
And that's funny because I consider myself
myself
a city boy because I'm from Kansas City, but Kansas City is such a tiny city, compared to larger cities like, the Los Angeleses and
New York,
Denvers and New York, things like that. Yeah.
The Dallases. I don't know.
Why have you stayed here so long?
My family, my father was the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce at one time, which gave me a really strong connection with a lot of the business community here. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, instead of going to clubs and bars and things like that, when I was 21, my dad was taking me to business after hours. Nice. And so he was teaching me how to network and things like that. And so therefore, it's like I started developing a large network of contacts and business individuals. And so, I'm part of the multiple chambers of commerce here. Mm-hmm. And so I like being involved in the city and being involved in the business community, nonprofit community. And so when you have those kind of deep roots and connections, it's hard really just to get up and leave and go try that someplace else because your contacts here are gold.
Yeah, that explains a lot because I wanted to ask you how you started into the journey of entrepreneurship and but that answers that question because you started at a young age. Your dad introduced you to that idea and that concept.
I think it was even before that too, because when I look back at my family history, we've got a history of entrepreneurialism. My grandfather owned his own TV repair shop up in Rosedale. And so he, built his own. After having that business, he built his own home up in Rosedale, and my grandmother lived in that until she passed. And then, and my dad also had his own business. He was an entrepreneur as well, as a photographer. And then of course my aunt is an entrepreneur, my sister's an entrepreneur. So it's kind of genetic, I think, how we've got that gene to be independent.
Okay, so coming from a Hispanic or a minority position, what would you say that experience was like compared to other minorities at that time? Because I felt like, at least for me personally in my personal network, there was not a lot of entrepreneurialism in the minority demographic, at least where I'm from. But maybe that's just from my observation. I know Ruby's parents were entrepreneurs, and I have other friends whose parents were that way too. But for me, it was like on the outside looking in. Like I didn't understand how it worked. My family wasn't that way. So did you experience? How do I want to phrase the question? Did you experience like a juxtaposition between like other minorities that you're growing up with and your mindset of entrepreneurialism?
That's a good question.
No, I don't really think I looked at other people's mindsets at all, honestly. I've always, what's interesting is I've always had, like, when I was a kid, I always had a desk. And I always had that's
and a briefcase.
And a briefcase. So my mom, when we were kids, she would take us to work with her in the evenings when she had to work late, and she would put my sister and I to work for like labeling, documents that needed to go out or mailers that needed to go out. And so my sister and I, we joke because our toys when we were kids were like office supplies. And that's kind of like our happy place now. When we're in an office supply store,
Office Depot is
that's
your
like office supply or Micro Center or something like that. We're like, that's our happy place, and because we like all those like office gadgets. And I've had a desk and personal office in my home ever since I was like 13 or something like that. I mean, I've always had that, and so my mind's always been in this frame of doing business, being an independent business person. And I don't think I ever compared it to other people or looked at it and thought I was different. Yeah. I just was.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, like I said, I was not exposed to that kind of thought process.
I don't think I was necessarily exposed to it either. I think my parents are just straight up hustlers. Like, they just did whatever they could. And that's what I understood. I understood the hard work, and I understood that people could do their own thing. But as far as like being a tech entrepreneur, owning like something that is a little more abstract or obscure now than when we were growing up, that's like more tech based, I had no idea that was a possibility. Like, that's not something that my parents pushed either. They pushed get an education, go get a job, get married, buy a house, and so I didn't even think that was something that
I was a creative person ever since I started doing art when I was in third grade, or maybe even younger actually, because my mom has some of my early kindergarten artwork. But my family always pushed me to be creative. They're just like, just try and be creative. And so now, when I get up, basically like every day, it's almost like a ritual, or like the first thing I do is I start getting up and I do something creative. And that might be something in Photoshop, that might be video editing. But I'm I can go right into doing something creative, and then I can start getting into work and things like that. But that kind of gets the creative juices flowing first thing in the morning.
Would you say that's how you combine that creative skill with your entrepreneurial spirit? Is that how you came to marketing?
Interestingly, when I was in college, I was pursuing art, and I'm sorry, I liked art, but I was pursuing a degree in psychology. And when I think about art and psychology now, I really do think about that's what marketing is. It's the combining of art and creativity with psychology, because you've got to create something that motivates a buyer to purchase, to make that phone call. When I'm working with talent on their scripts, I let them know, I'm like, your voice over the microphone and what they record has to motivate them. Like, when you like make that call, I did this and you can do it too. You've got to be really enthusiastic about how you sound. So I just think that helps move the needle in terms of getting the client's product in front of people and moved to be successful.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Kansas Community College. Started there because it was right there local. Got a scholarship to go up to a presidential scholarship to go up to Benedictine College, and then I wrapped up at Kansas University, KU. In Lawrence.
Okay.
Nice. Oh, Rock Chalk.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you
My
went to
family's
KU.
from Lawrence. My grandmother and aunts and uncles and things like that on my mom's side are all from Lawrence. So I kind of grew up in Lawrence because we would go to Lawrence all the time as children. So it's kind of like a second home.
Yeah, I love Lawrence. So you would say that you kind of arrived at the marketing after college, or in college you kind of realized that that was a business move?
After college, yeah, absolutely. I was a corporate trainer for some time, which again is it's almost like acting. You know, you're motivating a leadership team to do better, but then I got into the advertising side and started doing advertising sales for Dos Mundos bilingual newspaper, which is the largest bilingual and oldest bilingual newspaper here in Kansas City. And I was coming up with creative ideas for clients. They'd say, okay, Nicholas, we've got $20,000 to spend, but we don't know what to do with it. And so I would come up with the concepts on we'll take this photograph, we'll do this project, and we'll put your brand on the logo inside of it, and it would kind of wrap around what that product was about, and they would let me produce it and shoot it, and then we'd get it into the print because it was a newspaper, and so that's when I started realizing that a lot of these brands don't know what to do about Hispanic consumers and how to attract them. So that's when I kind of went on my own and said, I wanted to do more than just print. I wanted to do web. Social media was just launching back then. And so and radio and television. So I just thought about all the different mediums versus just print.
How do you start that conversation? How did you approach the newspaper or one of your clients about what you can do for them?
Well, it was back in 2003, honestly. It was back in 2003, and back then, the Census Bureau had announced in the New York Times that the Hispanic market was now the largest minority group in the United States. And I remember we were all really excited about it. Like, wow, like that's a huge number. And businesses and clients will finally start doing something about it because we saw this number coming. The trends are going that way already. And as marketers, you have to future think, where you're like, where's it going? And so with that, we started approaching clients and said, hey, this is a fast-growing market. It's growing at a 167% growth rate compared to white Americans who are growing at a 1% growth rate. Where do you want to put your money? And they're like, we'll put it in the 1%.
Right. Yeah.
So it's still happening these days where businesses are still like suffering from analysis paralysis, honestly. And that's honestly just because they really just don't know how to approach it. So really I wanted to do was consult with them like, look, here's how you got to start thinking about this market because they really do come at this really with a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions in their head. So that's where.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting stuff because that's true. Those trends are happening. They're happening way faster than anybody has been thinking about it, and especially, as you said, like those companies that are investing that money in other places. But that conversation is definitely interesting.
There's so much money on the table for the Hispanic market, and it's amazing how underserved it is. And I mean, you've been dealing with this for what, 15 years now? 15 years with the Hispanic market, and we've been the largest minority group since what,
2003.
Goodness gracious. You're putting in good work right now.
Well, I mean, I've always looked at it as a long-term investment, and I feel like it's really starting to pay off now. We're starting to get clients that are like, okay, we need to do focus groups, we need to understand better, and so,
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We're here with Nicholas Segura from Nicholas Segura Marketing, and we're lucky to have him here, and we'll be right back after the break.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back to the show. We're the Realennials. I'm Pat.
I'm Ruby.
And we're back here again with Nicholas Segura from Segura Marketing. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad we're here. I mean, it's cool to be in these studios that we've opened up. I mean, this is really going to be like a great space to be creative with everyone. I think that's kind of a good way to start the year.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, we're collaborating with Nicholas Segura in a production space, and it's been fantastic so far. 40 minutes into our first production.
I know, right?
Well, it's taken a lot of work. I mean, we're honestly like the whole team with lightings and cameras, audio. Nico Wiggins at Level 3 Studios. I mean, it's been a big team effort.
Shout out to Nico.
Shout out to Nico.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting, and it's here in Kansas City, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
So what do you think about marketing here in Kansas City right now? What do people out there need to know?
Yeah, let's talk about
I think
that.
a lot of people don't realize how big the marketing industry is here in Kansas City. Kansas City's got the largest ad club in the United States. On top of that, the ad club, which is now called the American Advertising Federation, was founded here in Kansas City, along with the Hispanic Chamber, National Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And we
Really?
also have the Guadalupe Center. I'm just tying a few things together, historical. The Guadalupe Center is the oldest Hispanic-focused nonprofit agency in the United States, which is just a few blocks down the road.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of history that gets started here in Kansas City. A lot of people don't recognize that.
Okay. And in terms of marketing per se, what would you say local businesses need to know about what you do? Or what are they missing out on?
Again, as I said earlier, I think a lot of people are still trying to understand this Hispanic market segment. I'm doing presentations all the time. I just did a presentation for the Global Entrepreneurship Week held a couple months ago, and the Intercontinental Public Library System actually has me booked out for the next year doing presentations at some of their local libraries to small business organizations, groups they have as well. So I'll be talking about things like what's the market, what are their media habits? Because one of the things that people are trying to figure out is like, where do people go to get their media? Where are they getting their news? Where are they on social media, Facebook? And when you know where they're getting their media from, that's when you start placing your media. You start developing your media strategy, and you start developing your creative ideas for that medium.
These people that you meet at these presentations that you do, like, what can you give us an idea of what kind of businesses are out there looking for, like here locally, looking for the Hispanic market?
It's every kind of business. It's like brands, advertising agencies, organizations, nonprofits, services. They're really all trying to figure it out. There's not a particular type. It's businesses that are trying to get new consumers and grow because they see that the numbers are really growing out there, but they're just really just kind of trying to figure out how do we talk to them. Honestly, when it comes to the language, for example, everyone's they get wrapped around like Spanish, but they don't realize that Latinos have been here since the beginning of the United States and before, and so and there's also generations that were told not to speak Spanish. So there are generations,
Myself included in that.
There are generations of Hispanics that do not speak any Spanish whatsoever, more fully acculturated to the American culture, but still very connected to their Hispanic roots. And so you've got to try to market utilizing cultural touch points versus just language. Because if you just do language, you're going to miss out on something.
Well, and I saw this a lot. People lump all Latinos together, right? They don't see that you do really have to target regionally or dialects or whatever that is. I mean, do you see that a lot? People are just assuming that all Hispanic consumers are the same?
Yeah, absolutely. First, it's language. They think that all Hispanics speak Spanish. And I think they speak Spanish. And I think that if you were to look at news, for example, if you look at news media coverage of, everyday news, it looks like Hispanics are just coming into the country. They're just, but
they're on that caravan coming
yeah,
over.
but
all
but the
time.
reality, not too long ago, I remember maybe about 10 years ago, one afternoon I go into my friend Mark Lozano. He's a Latino photographer here in Kansas City, and he's in there playing Teddy Pendergrass jams, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, because I grew up listening to that type of stuff too, and I hadn't heard that album in a long time. But I thought, wow, it's like how I listen to that type of music, whereas in the stereotype is for me to listen to ranchera or banda type music,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't listen to that at all. And so
What?
I do.
No te gusta? You don't like it?
I mean, I've heard so much of it
It's
as
not
a
your
child.
style. Yeah,
I'm like,
it's not your
"Ew,"
style.
yeah. And so when I think about acculturated Hispanics, where they're at compared to new arrivals. What I've got to educate businesses on is like, which audience are you trying to reach? It's almost like, trying to talk to women. Okay, so we want to get more women consumers. Well, what kind of women consumers do you want? Are you looking at professionals who are making 5 figures?
Yeah, or
are you
stay-at-home moms.
Exactly. You've got to figure it out, and you just can't lump women together. Almost like Bic pens did with their pink and
my
purple
God.
pens.
What Ellen did about that was hilarious.
It
Her
was,
little
and
skit.
that's a really great example of what to do, because when you lump Hispanics into one group and just say they all speak Spanish. My mom, she'll get, for example, mailers, and it's all in Spanish, and she's an English dominant Latina, and so she's like, well, I can't read this, and so she just tosses it. It gets nowhere.
Interesting.
What mistakes have people made? Speaking of that, like other than the language thing, is there any other mistakes that you see brands commonly make, and something that they can fix easily? You know what?
The biggest one that comes to my head first is just the undervalue or not assuming the power of the Hispanic Latina, for example. Nielsen just came out with a report a few months ago that talked about how the Latina U.S. consumer in the United States, which controls the world's 7th largest economy. The Hispanic female.
Let that sink in, y'all. Let it sink in.
They are the most powerful Hispanic consumer group in the United States. They're the largest influencers. They are the fastest growing. They're the youngest with an average age of 23.
They're the most entrepreneurial.
At 60 million at the end, and the most entrepreneurial, opening 6 for every one business that a Caucasian woman opens. 6 Hispanic women are opening businesses. Wow. 1 in 6, 1 in 6, 1 in 6. And so when I talk to banks, and I'm like, these are the numbers. Do you want to grow your business segment, or do you want to grow your consumer segment? Those are the numbers that they have to contend with and decide, like, what are we going to do about this?
Wow, that's profound.
Well, the numbers, honestly, those are just intro numbers. But when you dive, if you do even just a surface level research on Hispanic consumers, you'll find some mind-blowing, profoundly large growth numbers. They are the future of the United States, honestly.
Well, the average age of a Hispanic consumer right now is what compared to the...
Yeah, so the average age of Hispanic consumers is 27.
27.
Yeah, and that population is growing, at 167% according to the Census Bureau. The average age of the first generation Hispanic here in the U.S. is only 19. So they're very young. They're very mobile, very tech savvy, very aspirational. So they're always trying to get ahead. So when it comes to companies that are trying to sell homes, sell computers, sell goods and services, you've got to think that way. That this is a very young audience, which means that you've got to get a younger team. And that's in fact what my client just told me this last week. We got a new client that's trying to reach new Latino consumers, and they went with our team because they said that our team was a young millennial team that reflected the audience that they're trying to get versus a kind of general, maybe an older Hispanic agency that might have older teams and things like that.
How would you say the development of the increasing Latino trend is tied together with the development in online digital marketing over the past, I think you said you've been doing this for over 15 years. Mm-hmm. Throughout that time, is it tied together? Is it related, or are they two separate things?
Well, a really good example of a success story would be BuzzFeed. Mm-hmm. BuzzFeed's more than 50% of their growth in the last 2 years has been because of their Hispanic followers, and they've just done a few more things creatively to talk about. Remember those the guys that were the guys from, I think they were jail guys. Gangsters making candy.
Cholos?
Yeah, the cholos making candy out of
trying sushi for the first time.
Yeah.
Those videos are hilarious.
Or kale. They were trying kale.
Okay.
And so, it was just they're just being creative and having fun with it, but they grew their audience by 50%. The growth of that audience has been 50% has been the Hispanic viewer, and so what it tells you is that the young Latino audience are spending an exorbitant amount of time looking at YouTube videos, social media, being on. They I'm losing the word right now. They over index on social media, web browsing, app streaming, all of the mobile behaviors. Hispanics over-index. And to explain what over-index means, because a lot of people ask me what that means.
What does that mean?
That basically means that the average person does, let's say the average viewer watches television 75% of the time. Over-indexing means going over and above that. So they over-index.
Okay. Over the average.
All of the all of the mobile behaviors.
So, okay, you mentioned BuzzFeed, but is there any like bigger brands that are doing the Hispanic marketing thing right? Like, you know, I don't want to name names, but like bigger.
Yeah, you know, what's
Pepsi,
interesting?
Coke.
What's interesting is that one example that I use is Wells Fargo, for example. One evening, I'm watching The Daily Show streaming on my Apple TV, and one evening I see a Wells Fargo television commercial with about a Hispanic family, and a young Latina who's like 18 comes home with her first check, and she shows everyone her check, and everyone's like, "Oh, cool." They say, you know, and then she deposits her check using the mobile app, and you know, everyone's like, "Cool," you know, and there's a tagline at the end. Now, when you see that in your mind, I don't know if you see that in your mind as an English ad or a Spanish ad, but the ad that I'm talking about was done all in English. In fact, a little bit of Spanglish in there too, maybe a word or two in Spanglish. The next night, I see the same ad, but this time it's done completely in Spanish. Same family, same script, same behaviors, but it's all done in Spanish. So what they've done is they've done a Spanglish version and a Spanish version. And everyone can, you know, they've covered both of their bases. They've covered the entire family. They've kind of showed a nice modern family, and it really does the effort to reach the broadest Hispanic audience.
Yeah, there was an abuela in that commercial, so I'm sure the Spanish got the abuelas and maybe the parents, and then the English version probably got those younger generations that are just getting their first checks and you know, getting into mobile banking and whatnot.
I feel like I really like the Spanglish version because you know it was primarily English, but I feel like what's happening with the you know, young Hispanics is that they are growing up in an English dominant environment, so they're picking up English fast. And whereas in like I do see a lot of like people who are Spanish dominant, and you know, when you don't speak Spanish, they're like, "Oh man, you don't speak Spanish," and they're like, they don't realize that their children are going to be just like that. They're going to be growing up in an English speaking world, and they're going to not speak Spanish either.
Not my kids. Van a hablar español.
Is the Hispanic market, are they buying stuff that's specifically Hispanic, or is it just that marketing needs to be directed to them socially in order to get them to more participate in the consumer market that already exists?
Well, they're certainly buying a lot, that's for sure. But what needs to happen is that just like everything, you've got to be invited to come to the party. You've got to be invited to come to the event. You've got to be invited to buy the product. And what can enhance that is when a brand shows you that they recognize you. Yeah. Pat, when you see a young Latino guy in the commercial, you're like, oh, cool, you know, or Latina, or even you hear some Spanglish in there, you're like, oh, wow. That's cool. You feel like they get you a little bit even. If they really do something that's really focused on that, then you're like, wow, they really get us. So
yeah, that's why I don't feel like I can drive a Lincoln, because I have to be Matthew McConaughey.
That's a very good point. But you know what? I would love to see a Lincoln commercial with the Latina. You know, a power Latina who's a business executive. Because look, these business owners are Latinas, and they're looking for a cool car to look really good in.
Exactly, and this is not an ad. Well, guys, we're here with Nicholas Segura. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Realennials. I'm Ruby.
I'm Pat.
And we're joined today by Nicholas Segura. If you haven't been listening, we are talking about Kansas City, the Hispanic marketing, and Nicholas's thoughts on all of this. So, Nicholas, living in Kansas City, what do you think about our city?
You know, I think Kansas City's a beautiful place. I love the size. there's so many. For example, like with the talent agency, for example, I run a talent agency here in Kansas City as well, where we people hire our ethnic talent actors to be in commercial, print, and voiceover broadcast, and I find like beautiful people here in Kansas City to be in those commercials, and people are really surprised to find that those type of people are here in Kansas City. But there are so many people. In fact, I was just sharing earlier with one of our talent, Marlene Vieda, who's like the Sofia Vergara of Kansas City.
She's awesome.
Yeah. Talk about personality. So they're
energy.
here. There's so much fun going on here too. Plus the Silicon Prairie and the entrepreneurial community that's happening here. I think it's great, and I like just being a part of it. Knowing a lot of the business leaders here in Kansas City.
I love Kansas City too.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about. So you work basically regarding your modeling agency. So you're kind of an agent, or for an agency for minority models. So how does that work? I mean, like legally, I guess. I don't know. I don't like the word legally, but like in terms of
with the law,
like excluding Caucasian models, for example.
Well,
Nicholas does not discriminate.
The talent industry, the marketing industry, they need, for example, African American grandmothers and then their grandbabies, or a Latina mom and her young millennial daughter, Hallmark cards needed, for example, one of our models, Yara Puente, and they were like looking for a mom. So of course, clients, they look for real families, and so Yara's mom looks just like her, a gorgeous woman, and so they were both in a print ad for Hallmark cards together. So the thing is that the reality of it is that clients are looking for stereotypical looks. So while there are a lot of different looks that can be found, you have, when it comes to the commercial talent industry, you're looking for people who have a commercial look, someone that can be a relatable Latino, relatable African American, relatable Asian, and sometimes even people who have wilder and crazier looks. That's starting to happen now.
That's cool.
They're also looking for people that aren't model-like. They're looking for more street-looking people, more ordinary people, because that's becoming more of a trend as well.
Like the curvy Latinas.
Are you saying I could be a model?
You could, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is where we cut to Pat modeling.
Even though it looks like someone stomped me in my face when I was a child.
What?
No, you know what? Actually, I mean, you might be like the Latino uncle or the brother in the family shot.
You're such a Theo, dude.
Yeah.
I just remember.
So exactly. Yeah, you could totally do that. I mean, they need that type of look, even with the beard and everything. Yeah.
Vente, mijo.
You just gotta hold the piñata up and you're in.
Oh man.
That's the Theo rite of passage. If you.
So there's lots of looks. There's lots, and the thing is that not only that, but we also write some of the scripts. For example, we were working with Schlitterbahn, and the typical engagement is that they say, okay, Nicholas, here's our English ad. Can you make it Spanish and make it work? So you got to take a English jingle. Totally tear it apart, rewrite it in Spanish, because an English jingle writes and rhymes with the music, and you got to recreate a new one in Spanish. And so we did that. In fact, the singer Laura Noble was the voiceover or the singer for that particular Schlitterbahn jingle. Yeah, and that was really
the
fun.
English version.
The Spanish version.
Oh, the Spanish version.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
She's a bilingual Latina.
Man, that's great. What have you? So you've been here your whole life, and you've developed and cultivated this experience here, an entrepreneurial experience here in Kansas City. And you've explained that that's due to the roots. You started here when you were young, established all these connections. Do you think that you could replicate that in another city, or what you have here is unique? Or in general, what we have here as creators in Kansas City, do you think that's unique?
No, I think we could totally replicate it. I mean, we can go to Austin, we can go to Los Angeles. I mean, to create an agency, for example, that does multicultural marketing is going to be something that's future thinking, of course. Needing diverse, multicultural, multilingual talent is future thinking. You're going to need that more and more these days. So yeah, it could totally be replicated. Our hope is at some point to open up another branch in another city, like perhaps Denver.
Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. What do you like about Kansas City right now?
I like that we're being creative like this. I mean, honestly, like this set, this studio, being able to work with other business owners to find spaces like this. I mean, we are we're having this experience right now.
Everybody, go check out the video version of this podcast.
Yeah, because
this broadcast,
just the studio that we're in right now, the fact that we're all collaborating to make this happen. The Catch, which is the other podcast that we're going to be working on producing. Yes. The Level 3 Studios podcast that we're going to be producing. It's just all of these creative people working together. And I think what I really appreciate is the fact that everyone that's coming together on these projects are, multicultural, multi-talented. And that's breaking the mold in the advertising industry, because ultimately in the creative industry, it's a very white-dominated industry. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things like in STEM, the science, technology, engineering, math. Those are all industries that need more women and diversity. The advertising industry is the same way. So I just feel like I'm really lucky to be working with such a really diverse and creative team.
Kansas City is the spot right now for all of this to be happening. And, because a lot of the advertising industry is here as well, this is a really good breeding ground for more diversity. And we've had these conversations around town with people about how to diversify, how to add more creatives of color to the landscape in town. And have you been working more on that right now? What are you seeing? Like, what are the trends with creative?
I think the advertising agencies, for example, they're a really big target. They're seeing the need for it, but I still feel like it's still a surface discussion mm-hmm. with them. There are people within agencies who really want to push it, but it's hard to change industries that dramatically that fast. They're just they're so busy doing their own things, billings and being creative for their clients, that it's hard for them to stop and look at themselves and say, like, we really got to change this. But it takes a really big shift for them to do something like that. They see it, they know that it's coming. They've done discussions around it. You and I were at the event down at Barkley.
Brand Lab,
which is I'm hoping to interview Gadir, the executive director of that, pretty soon.
Oh, she's great.
Myself, but there's movement in there, and we can see that the nation in itself is changing dramatically with demographics, voting habits with young millennials as well as Latinos. So things are changing dramatically. I think happening fast.
I'm excited about it. So. Just to move on a little bit on the diversity topics, what do you think is the future of marketing to maybe like diverse millennials? What do you see there?
Well, certainly diverse and millennials, you put those two together, those two groups together, and you have a very powerful consumer group right there. And I think that you will have to, as brands, products, services, you will have to take those two large consumer groups into very serious consideration. Mm-hmm. And when you really start looking into diversity, multiculturalism, and millennials, and taking those things seriously, not just superficially, almost like you remember the Pepsi ad that crashed and burned that one day with Kylie Jenner. Yeah, sad. That's a really good example of checking all the boxes, but still not reaching a level of authenticity.
Mm-hmm. What was that about? I don't know. Fill me in.
It was a big. I don't know if it was a Super Bowl ad.
It was. No, I don't think it was.
But it was a gigantic ad that where like almost like a revolutionary type scene.
Like a riot was happening.
And they're not a riot. Let's say not riot, but almost like a protest march.
Okay, yeah.
And all these people were like saying, we're going to go against the system, and we're all going to band together. And they had all kinds of people like multicultural, transgender, everything you could think of, artists and things like that who are joining this revolution. And Jenner, what's her first name?
Kylie
Jenner.
Kendall
Jenner there's a photo shoot of Kendall off to the side, and she's watching all this, and then she decides to leave her photo shoot. She's like, this is more important, this protest, and she leaves that, and she becomes the leader of it. And then at the end, she hands the Pepsi to the police officer, and everything's all cool. And everyone was like, what is that?
I missed that. I remember seeing a few headlines for that.
I don't think.
Yeah.
But I never watched the ad.
It was just the juxtaposition of Kylie. Kylie. Kendall is not known necessarily as a revolutionary thinker or leader.
Right.
And so to put her as like the forefront all of a sudden as a leader of that, was
Very
just like,
superficial.
yeah, exactly.
And contrived.
So it threw the entire commercial out. So the millions of dollars they spent for that got the worst press and was shut down within 24 hours.
Wow. How did they not see that coming?
Well, I believe that the way they didn't see it coming was that they didn't test that ad in front of young millennials and diverse people. I think and there's a lot of yes people in the advertising industry, and they didn't, they didn't put it in front of real Latinos, African Americans, transgender people to look at it, because they would have told them, this does not connect. They would have told them that, I think, because that's how everyone responded. That's why it shut down in one day.
That's why there needs to be more diverse, young creatives in these advertising agencies or in the system, at least, even just being asked their opinion, because it's important. And then whenever the backlash happens or whenever it goes, the opposite direction than they thought, they can't be surprised if they didn't ask.
Well, it's important to
anybody.
listen as well. It's not just important just to have the team there, but also to listen to the feedback. I work with a lot of clients who they love my ideas, but they still want me to produce it their way, the way they like. I'm like, but that's not going to work. That's not authentic. It's not, you're not, that's not going to reach this target audience that you want. So, the clients themselves have to listen as well. So it's a two-way street.
I imagine that can be difficult, especially as we've already established. There's such a archaic way of viewing marketing, and people that are running businesses and brands that have been around for so long, to be told to their face that, okay, everything's different. Let's do this all differently, to really reach these demographics that have changed. These kids that are growing up with tablets and are multicultural.
Yeah.
Wow, profound stuff.
That just reminds me of my little sister. She's on that tablet so much these days.
That's a very good point, because not too long ago, you and I got a chance to meet Maria Hinojosa from...
Oh my gosh, I haven't even posted pictures about that.
From Latino USA. She's a national award-winning journalist Latina who runs Futuro Media Group. And she had a whole show called Telefono, where she talks about how young Latinos are over-indexing on their phones and how they're using their phones, how they're writing entire term papers on their mobile phones.
Oh my God.
I cannot believe that. No.
There's not enough Adderall in the world.
But that's all multicultural marketing world. There's a lot of creative stuff happening here in Kansas City as well too. There's like right now I'm involved with the Kansas City Rising Diversity Task Force as well, which is really great. We just had this really great conversation. They create the Diversity Rising organization came up with a thing that said, here's what the task force is about, and they had all these minorities as part of the group, and we saw that and we're like, this doesn't work. We wiped it out completely. And I was telling the leaders of that this is the first time in 15 years that I've had a serious conversation about diversity and multiculturalism in seriousness. And they listened. And to me, I like to be able to say that that's the first time that's happened in 15 years. It says a lot as to where we're at and how people are viewing multiculturalism.
You've been hanging in there, because it just sounds like it's just now starting to really, really catch on. And you've been seeing it for years, but there is that lag with everybody else, especially because we're in the Midwest, we're in the middle of the country, so we're not getting all of that East Coast, West Coast stuff right now. East Coast, West Coast stuff.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nicholas. We really appreciate you having us on. Where can people find you at?
Oh, well, they can find me at Segura.marketing is the website. And if you just look up Nicholas Segura, Segura, on the web, there's articles and interviews and things like that. You'll find me.
And you're on Instagram and everything, all social.
/Nicholas Segura.
And you can just probably go to any like important event in Kansas City, and Nicholas will probably be there. So just look out for him. He's around.
I wish I could make all those events, but
All right, well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your conversation. Be sure to check us out too, the Realennials. We're on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. Check out the video stuff. Hit us up at Gmail, therealennials@gmail.com.
Yes, send us questions. We'd love to give advice, so what up?
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.